"We are alone. Let's do what is necessary," the Apache woman whispered mockingly. The sun was slowly setting over the desert, painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and purple. The air was warm, but the temperature would drop quickly once the night arrived. A small group of hikers had chosen this remote region for their adventure, eager to escape the crowded city and spend a few days in the quiet of nature. Among them was Elena, a young woman in her early 20s, with bright eyes that reflected both curiosity and determination. She had always loved exploring new places, especially places that challenged her in ways she had never experienced before. The group had set up camp near a cluster of rocks that offered a small amount of shelter from the wind. They pitched their tents, gathered firewood, and tried to make the campsite as comfortable as possible. The desert was beautiful, but it was also unforgiving. Every sound seemed amplified in the stillness of the evening. The rustling of the wind through the dry brush, the occasional distant call of a bird, even the crunch of small animals moving over rocks, it all made the hikers more aware of how alone they were. Elena wandered a little away from the main group, her boots crunching softly against the dry sand. She loved the feeling of being slightly apart, observing the world from a distance. That's when she noticed unusual tracks near a patch of scrubby bushes. They were unlike anything she had seen before, small but deliberate, and they moved with a purpose that suggested someone or something had passed that way recently. Her heart began to beat a little faster, not from fear but from curiosity. She returned to the group, trying to keep her excitement calm. "I think someone else has been here recently," she said, pointing to the tracks. The others looked, some shrugged, some looked uneasy. One of the hikers, a man named David, tried to make light of it. "Maybe it's just an animal," he said, trying to sound confident. But the truth was, even he could feel a strange tension in the air. The desert had a way of making people feel small and vulnerable, and there was a presence there that none of them could explain. As night fell, the group gathered around a small fire. The flames flickered and danced, casting long shadows across their faces. They shared stories, laughter, and the warmth of companionship, trying to ignore the growing darkness beyond the firelight. But Elena kept her gaze on the edges of the campsite, alert to every sound. That's when she heard it, a faint whisper, soft but clear, carried by the wind. "We are alone, let's do what is necessary." The words sent a shiver down her spine. They were spoken in a calm voice, but there was something in the tone that made her heart race. She turned quickly, scanning the area around the fire, but saw nothing. The others hadn't heard it, or at least they pretended not to. She felt a mixture of fear and fascination. Who could have said that, and why? A movement caught her eye near the rocks. She squinted, trying to make sense of the shadow. Then she saw her, an Apache woman, standing just beyond the firelight. She was alone, yet her presence was strong, commanding even. Her dark hair framed her face, and her eyes held a calm intensity that made Elena instinctively step back. There was no fear in the woman's eyes, only a quiet confidence that made Elena wonder how someone could be so composed in the middle of the desert night. The woman didn't move closer immediately. She simply watched, and for a moment it felt as if time had slowed. The group was tense, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. Finally, Elena found her voice. "Who are you?" she asked, trying to sound brave. The woman didn't answer right away. Instead, she smiled faintly, almost as if amused by the question, and tilted her head slightly. It was then that Elena realized that the words she had heard earlier weren't a threat. They were a challenge, a test. The woman was showing them something, though what exactly, Elena couldn't yet tell. The desert had its rules, and those who respected them survived. This woman clearly knew those rules, and she carried them with a quiet authority that made Elena both nervous and intrigued. The hikers tried to continue their night as normal, but the presence of the Apache woman lingered in their minds. Every sound seemed louder, every shadow more pronounced. Elena couldn't stop thinking about the words again, "We are alone, let's do what is necessary." What did it mean? Was it advice, a warning, or simply a statement of fact? She didn't know, but it stayed in her mind, repeating over and over as she stared into the darkness beyond the firelight. Hours passed, and the group eventually went to their tents, trying to sleep. Alina lay awake, listening to the wind and the distant sounds of desert wildlife. Every now and then she thought she heard a soft footstep, a gentle shift in the sand near the rocks. She wanted to investigate, but she also knew that the desert could be dangerous at night. She stayed still, alert but patient, waiting for whatever might come next. When dawn began to break, the sky painted in pale gold and soft pink, the woman was still there. She had not left, yet she did not approach. Instead, she moved with a calm purpose, observing, waiting. Alina could see now that she carried no weapons, yet she seemed ready for anything. It was a strange feeling, to be both comforted and unnerved at the same time. The group packed up camp, and the Apache woman finally spoke again, this time in a clear, steady voice. She offered to guide them for a short distance, showing them a safer path through the desert terrain. Alina hesitated, unsure whether to trust her instincts or fear the unknown, but something in the woman's eyes told her that she was offering help, not harm. Slowly they agreed to follow, curiosity winning over caution. As they walked together, Alina noticed small lessons everywhere: how the woman moved quietly, how she observed the environment, how she found water and safe resting spots. It was a quiet education in survival, and Alina realized that the whispered words from the night before were a lesson in preparation, courage, and awareness. Do what is necessary was more than a warning, it was guidance. By the time the sun rose fully above the horizon, the group felt a strange mix of awe and gratitude. The Apache woman remained mostly silent, letting her actions speak for her. Alina couldn't stop thinking about her, and she knew that this encounter, brief as it was, would leave a lasting impression. The desert had its mysteries, and some lessons could only be learned through experience, observation, and trust. As they moved further into the open desert, the woman stayed with them for a short while longer, ensuring they were safe on the path ahead. Then, as quietly as she had appeared, she turned and disappeared back into the rocks and scrub, leaving the hikers with the memory of a night that felt both real and extraordinary. Alina walked silently beside the group, the words still echoing in her mind. "We are alone, let's do what is necessary." She didn't fully understand them yet, but she knew she would. The desert had a way of teaching those who were willing to listen, and Alina had begun to pay attention. For the first time, she felt truly aware of her surroundings, her choices, and the courage it would take to face whatever came next. The day ahead was uncertain, the path difficult, but Alina felt ready. She had seen strength, calmness, and wisdom in someone she had barely known, and she realized that survival, both in the desert and in life, was not just about fear or caution. It was about understanding, action, and the willingness to do what was necessary when the moment arrived. The morning air was crisp and dry, carrying the scent of sand and distant desert flora. Alina and the rest of the hikers moved cautiously along the narrow path, following the Apache woman who had quietly appeared the night before. She walked with a calm confidence, her steps measured and precise, as if she were a part of the desert itself. Each movement seemed effortless, yet deliberate, and Alina couldn't help but notice how easily she navigated the rocky terrain, spotting hazards before they could even be noticed by the others. The hikers, still feeling a mixture of awe and apprehension, tried to keep pace. David, always the talkative one, attempted small conversation, but most of his words fell flat against the quiet authority of the woman. Alina observed him, noticing how the group's anxiety was slowly giving way to respect. There was something about the way the woman carried herself that demanded attention, not through force or threats, but through her mastery of the environment and her calm demeanor. They came to a small clearing surrounded by low shrubs and jagged rocks. The Apache woman stopped and gestured for the group to sit. She began to show them simple but effective ways to find water in the desert. She pointed out signs in the sand, slight depressions where water might gather, and certain plants whose roots could be carefully dug to reveal moisture. Alina listened intently, realizing that what they were learning wasn't just about survival, it was about observation, patience, and understanding the land. "Every step matters here," the woman said, her voice steady. "The desert doesn't forgive carelessness. You must pay attention, and you must act when it is necessary." Her words reminded Alina of the whispered message from the night before, and she finally began to understand the depth behind them. It wasn't a warning of danger alone, it was a lesson in awareness, responsibility, and readiness. The group spent the morning practicing the techniques she showed them. At first, it was awkward. They tripped over rocks, misjudged distances, and struggled to identify plants. But the woman never scolded or showed impatience. She simply demonstrated again, step by step, her movements smooth and effortless, as though she had been doing this her entire life. Alina felt a sense of inspiration. Watching her, she realized that courage was not only about facing visible danger, it was also about preparation, knowledge, and quiet confidence. By mid-morning, the temperature began to rise. The desert sun beat down on them, relentless and harsh. Sweat ran down the hikers' faces, and some began to complain of thirst and fatigue, but the Apache woman remained unaffected. She moved slowly, conserving energy, and encouraged the group to do the same. "Don't rush," she said. "Rushing is a mistake. Conserve your strength. Observe, think, then act." Alina noticed how this approach changed the group's dynamic. David, who had been impatient and anxious, began to slow down, taking careful steps and noticing the world around him instead of focusing on discomfort. Another hiker, Maria, who had been nervous and hesitant, started to gain confidence as she successfully found small amounts of water and identified edible plants. The woman's calm guidance had an almost magical effect, turning fear and uncertainty into learning and empowerment. As they moved deeper into the desert, Alina found herself paying attention to details she would normally overlook. The patterns of shadows on the sand, the movement of small animals, even the way the wind shifted through the rocks, all of it became meaningful. She realized that the desert was teaching her something more profound than just survival skills. It was teaching her patience, awareness, and the importance of staying calm under pressure. Suddenly, the woman paused and motioned for the group to stop. She pointed to a narrow path between two rocky outcrops, barely wide enough for one person. "This way," she said softly. As they followed, Alina noticed subtle changes. The rocks here were smoother, the sand more compact. She understood immediately. The woman was guiding them toward safety, avoiding potential dangers that they couldn't yet see. While they navigated the narrow path, Alina's thoughts drifted back to the night before. The whisper, "We are alone, let's do what is necessary," now felt less like a threat and more like a challenge to grow. She realized that the desert demanded action, but intelligent, careful action, not rash decisions. The Apache woman was teaching them to act thoughtfully, to understand the consequences of every step, and to trust in their own growing abilities. The morning passed, and the group finally reached a small plateau with a shallow stream. The water was clear and refreshing, a rare treasure in the harsh desert environment. The hikers drank eagerly, filling their canteens and washing their faces. Alina felt a sense of relief, but also gratitude toward the woman who had guided them here. She understood that without her, they might have struggled much longer, or worse, made dangerous mistakes. Sitting by the stream, the Apache woman began to share more of her knowledge. She taught them about the behavior of desert animals, which plants could provide sustenance, and how to read the land for signs of water or shelter. Alina absorbed every word, fascinated by the depth of understanding the woman had. She noticed that the lessons were not only practical but also philosophical. There was a rhythm to the desert, a balance that needed to be respected. The woman spoke not just of survival, but of living in harmony with the land, moving with intention, and valuing awareness above all else. The hikers practiced what they learned, collecting small amounts of food and observing animal tracks. Each success brought a boost in confidence. Elena felt herself growing stronger, not just physically, but mentally. She realized that courage wasn't simply about facing obvious danger, but about trusting yourself, learning from those who know more, and acting when it was necessary. The phrase echoed again in her mind, now full of meaning and inspiration. As the day wore on, clouds began to gather on the horizon, dark and heavy. The woman noticed them immediately, pointing out the changes in wind and temperature that hinted at an approaching storm. "We need to find shelter," she said. Elena watched as the group quickly adjusted, gathering supplies and moving toward a small cluster of rocks she had identified earlier. It was clear that every instruction the woman had given them in the morning, the careful observation, the attention to detail, the measured movement, was now preparing them for a new challenge. The hikers followed without hesitation, now trusting her completely. Even David, who had been skeptical at first, moved quietly, aware of the storm approaching and the importance of preparation. Maria, too, showed new confidence, helping to carry supplies and assisting Elena in navigating tricky sections of the rocky terrain. The woman's calm, steady presence had transformed the group, turning their fear into action and their uncertainty into teamwork. By late afternoon, they had reached a safe nook among the rocks. It was small, but offered protection from the wind and potential rain. The woman instructed them to gather loose branches and create a small barrier to shield themselves from the storm. Elena watched her closely, noticing how efficiently she worked, every movement precise, no energy wasted, every decision purposeful. She realized that the lessons of the day were about more than survival. They were about focus, discipline, and respect for both nature and oneself. As the first drops of rain began to fall, Elena felt a strange sense of calm. The storm could have been terrifying, but the group was prepared, guided by someone who knew exactly what to do. She reflected on how much they had learned in just one day, the whispers of the night, the careful guidance through the desert, the discovery of water and shelter. Every moment had taught them something, and the mysterious woman had been the silent teacher behind it all. Sitting by the protective rocks, Elena finally spoke, her voice soft but earnest. "Thank you for everything. I don't even know your name, but I feel like we've learned so much from you." The woman looked at her, a faint smile on her face, but said nothing. Her eyes, however, spoke volumes. They conveyed understanding, approval, and perhaps a hint of pride. The storm rumbled above, but inside their small shelter, there was a sense of safety and accomplishment. Elena understood that the desert, harsh and unpredictable, had taught them an invaluable lesson. Survival was not only about strength, but about awareness, careful action, and learning from those who knew more. And the words from the night before, "Do what is necessary," were no longer just a whisper in the wind. They were a guiding principle, one that Elena would carry with her long after the desert faded from view. As night approached, the hikers settled in, sharing quiet conversation and reflecting on the day's events. The Apache woman remained watchful, a silent guardian in the shadows. Elena felt a deep respect for her, realizing that this encounter was more than a chance meeting. It was a lesson in courage, wisdom, and the power of observation. The desert had revealed its secrets slowly, patiently, and those who were willing to listen had learned something far more important than simple survival. And as the rain fell lightly around them, Elena closed her eyes for a moment, listening to the sound of water on rocks and the whisper of the wind. She felt a sense of gratitude, not only for the shelter and guidance they had received, but for the awakening of her own awareness and courage. The day had been long and challenging, but it had been filled with lessons that would stay with her forever. The storm had passed, leaving the desert air fresh and slightly cooler, but the landscape was transformed. The sand was damp in places, and puddles reflected the pale morning light. The hikers stepped carefully over wet rocks and slippery ground, their clothes still damp from the night's rain. Alina felt a strange mix of relief and anticipation. The storm had tested their preparation, but it had also taught them the importance of observation, patience, and careful action. She wondered what the day ahead would bring. The Apache woman led them along a narrow, winding path that climbed gradually over low hills and rocky outcrops. Every step seemed deliberate, almost like a lesson in itself. She moved quietly but decisively, showing them how to avoid unstable ground, where to place their feet to prevent slipping, and how to gauge the terrain for hidden hazards. Alina noticed how her calm presence kept the group focused. Even David, who often complained about discomfort, walked carefully, trying to mirror her steadiness. As they climbed, the woman stopped suddenly and signaled for silence. The group froze, scanning the area around them. Alina followed her gaze and saw the faint tracks of a desert fox crossing the path ahead. It was small and unthreatening, but the lesson was clear. Attention to detail mattered. The woman knelt, pointing out the footprints, showing how the direction, depth, and spacing revealed the animal's size, speed, and behavior. Alina knelt beside her, amazed at how much could be learned from something so simple. "This is how you read the land," the woman said softly. "Every mark, every sign tells a story. If you pay attention, you can avoid danger and find what you need. If you ignore it, you may regret it." Her words reminded Alina of the phrase that had echoed in her mind since the first night: "Do what is necessary." She realized that it didn't just mean taking action. It meant observing, understanding, and then acting wisely. By late morning, the group reached a small dry wash, a shallow gully where water flowed only during rare storms. The rocks were slippery, and the ground was uneven, making each step a small challenge. The Apache woman stopped and looked back at them, her expression calm but firm. "Cross carefully," she instructed. "Think about every step, move slowly, and help each other." Alina took a deep breath and stepped forward. Her first few steps were cautious, testing the stability of the rocks. She remembered how the woman had moved so effortlessly, and she tried to mimic her balance and awareness. David followed next, stepping carefully and holding a branch for support. Maria hesitated, unsure of the footing, but Alina reached out her hand to guide her. The group crossed slowly but safely, each step reinforcing the lessons of observation, patience, and teamwork. Once across, the woman led them to a small area of desert shrubs that provided partial shade. She gestured for them to rest and hydrate. As they sat, Alina noticed how the woman didn't sit in comfort. She remained alert, scanning the surroundings, teaching vigilance even during moments of rest. Alina understood that survival wasn't just about physical skill. It was about maintaining awareness at all times, about being ready to act even when the world seemed calm. The group continued their journey, and by midday, they faced their first real test. A narrow ledge along a rocky cliff appeared ahead, just wide enough for one person to pass at a time. Below was a steep drop, and a single misstep could have dangerous consequences. The hikers paused, fear flickering across their faces. Alina felt her heart race, but she remembered the woman's lessons: careful observation, steady movement, and calm focus. The Apache woman stepped forward first, her movements precise and unhurried. She placed each foot carefully, testing the stability of the rocks, and maintained perfect balance. The hikers watched closely, taking mental notes of her technique. When it was Alina's turn, she felt a wave of nervousness, but she focused on the steps, slow, deliberate, and controlled. She reached out occasionally to steady herself with nearby rocks, moving one foot at a time. Step by step, she crossed the ledge, heart pounding but steady, feeling a sense of accomplishment. David followed, initially trembling but gradually finding his balance. Maria hesitated, looking down at the steep drop below, but Alina encouraged her gently. "We've done this before, just focus on each step. We can do it together." Maria nodded, and with Alina's guidance she made it across. The group breathed collectively, relieved and proud. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. After the ledge, the group found a natural cave in the rocks, a small shelter that would serve as a resting point for the night. The Apache woman motioned for them to set up camp. As they arranged their supplies and gathered firewood, she taught them how to start a fire efficiently, even with the damp conditions from the previous storm. Alina watched closely, noting how she arranged stones, collected kindling, and struck sparks with precision. The woman didn't just teach them how to survive physically. She showed them the importance of preparation, foresight, and careful planning. As evening approached, Alina noticed subtle tensions among the hikers. The challenges of the day, narrow paths, steep ledges, and uncertain terrain, had left some anxious. David muttered under his breath about how difficult the hike had become, while Maria expressed concern about the coming night. Alina remembered the woman's words, "Do what is necessary." She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. She encouraged her friends, sharing what she had learned from observing the Apache woman. The night settled in slowly. The cave offered shelter, but the sounds of the desert were constant. The rustling of small animals, the distant calls of birds, and the whisper of the wind through the rocks. Alina felt a sense of heightened awareness, her senses alert to everything around her. The Apache woman remained quiet, observing the group, occasionally offering guidance in a calm, understated voice. As the fire crackled, she finally spoke directly to the hikers. "You have done well today," she said, "but the desert will always test you. It is not enough to move. You must watch, learn, and act. Do what is necessary and nothing more. Hesitation can be costly." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Alina understood that survival wasn't just about skills, it was about judgment, awareness, and timely action. Later, as they settled down for the night, the group reflected quietly on the day's lessons. Each hiker realized how much they had grown in just a single day. They had faced fear, navigated hazards, and learned to trust one another. Alina felt a deep sense of gratitude for the Apache woman, whose calm guidance had transformed their fear into focus and their uncertainty into action. Even as she lay on her sleeping mat, Alina couldn't stop thinking about the challenges ahead. The desert was vast and unpredictable, but she felt stronger, more aware, and more capable than she had the morning before. She knew that the lessons they had learned today would carry them through future trials. The phrase from the first night continued to echo in her mind, "Do what is necessary." Now she understood it fully, not as a warning but as a principle to live by. The fire in the cave dimmed as the night deepened. Outside, the desert was silent but alive, the wind shifting and rustling the rocks. The hikers drifted into a careful, vigilant sleep, their minds still alert from the day's challenges. Alina stayed awake a little longer, observing the patterns of shadows and the movement of the wind. She felt a quiet confidence, the sense that she was learning to see the world as it was, rather than as she had imagined it. By dawn, the group would face even greater tests, navigating unknown terrain, dealing with the harsh sun, and facing the realities of desert survival. But tonight, in the small shelter of the cave, they had learned the value of preparation, teamwork, and trust. They had learned that courage was measured not in boldness alone, but in careful, thoughtful action. And they had learned that the lessons of the desert were often subtle, but always powerful. Alina closed her eyes, feeling the steady rhythm of her heartbeat and the calm of the Apache woman's presence nearby. She realized that survival and life itself demanded attention, patience, and wisdom. The desert had begun to teach her, and she was ready to listen. The next morning, the desert was quiet, almost eerily so. The hikers woke to the soft light of dawn, the rocks still damp from the previous storm. Birds called in the distance, and a faint breeze stirred the dry sand. Alina felt a mixture of excitement and tension. The Apache woman had guided them safely so far, but Alina knew that the desert's challenges were far from over. Today, they would face a real test of courage, skill, and trust. The group packed up quickly, the memory of yesterday's trials still fresh in their minds. Every step they took required concentration, as the rocks were uneven and puddles left slick patches along the path. The Apache woman walked ahead, silent and confident, her eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of danger. Alina noticed how she moved with purpose, yet with ease, every motion controlled, every glance precise. It was a stark reminder of how much they still had to learn. By mid-morning, they reached a narrow canyon, its walls rising steeply on either side. The floor was uneven, strewn with loose stones and jagged rocks. As they entered the canyon, a sudden sound echoed, a low growl, distant but clearly audible. The group froze. Alina's heart raced. The growl came again, closer this time, and it was unmistakable. A wild animal was nearby. The Apache woman stopped and signaled for silence. She crouched slightly, observing the surroundings. "Do not panic," she whispered. "We move carefully together. Trust each other and move only when necessary." Her calmness was contagious, and Alina felt herself taking a deep breath, steadying her nerves. The group followed her instructions, moving slowly, watching every shadow, listening to every sound. Suddenly, a coyote appeared, cautiously emerging from a rocky alcove. It was small but alert, its eyes fixed on the hikers. The Apache woman stepped forward, not in aggression, but in quiet authority. She moved with precision, creating a subtle barrier that directed the animal away from the group. Alina and the others stayed still, realizing that panicking could provoke the animal. Step by step, the woman guided them past the coyote, their hearts pounding but their movements controlled. Once the immediate danger had passed, the group continued deeper into the canyon. The sun climbed higher, beating down on them, and the air grew hotter and drier. They took turns sharing water, rationing what they had brought and collected from natural sources. The woman reminded them constantly to pace themselves, to conserve energy, and to watch the terrain for hazards. Alina realized that every lesson from the previous days, observation, careful movement, patience, was now essential. As they rounded a bend in the canyon, the ground suddenly gave way beneath David's foot. He slipped on loose gravel, catching himself just in time on a jagged rock. The group froze, fear flashing across their faces. Alina's heart raced, but she remembered the woman's teachings: act carefully, not rashly. She moved forward, extending her hand to David, steadying him as he regained balance. "See," the woman said calmly, "mistakes can happen. That is why you watch, plan, and act carefully. Always be ready to help each other." Her words reinforced the importance of teamwork and vigilance. Alina realized that survival was not just about individual skill. It was about supporting each other and maintaining focus under pressure. The canyon narrowed further, forcing them to squeeze between rocks in places. Every step was deliberate, requiring balance and concentration. Alina noticed the sweat on the woman's forehead, though her movements remained steady. Even someone so skilled had to respect the desert, its challenges, and its unpredictability. The hikers began to feel a sense of awe, not just for the woman, but for the power and harsh beauty of the landscape itself. Suddenly, a larger sound echoed through the canyon, a deep growl, louder and more threatening than before. The group stiffened. Alina's stomach tightened with fear. The sound came from a shadowed corner ahead, and a pair of glowing eyes became visible. A mountain lion was crouched, watching them. It was massive, dangerous, and clearly assessing its potential prey. The hikers froze, unsure of what to do. The Apache woman stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Do not run. Do not panic. Move slowly together and make yourself appear larger." She instructed them to gather sticks and branches, creating a makeshift barrier. Alina's hands shook as she picked up a sturdy branch, but she remembered the lessons of focus and careful action. They were no longer just following the woman, they were applying what they had learned. The mountain lion took a cautious step forward. Its muscles tensed, ready to strike if provoked. Alina and the others moved slowly, holding their ground, their fire from the previous night now replaced by determination and strategy. The woman's calm energy guided them, turning fear into controlled action. Step by step, they edged past the animal, keeping it at a distance without causing alarm. After what felt like hours but was only minutes, the mountain lion retreated, disappearing into the shadows. The group exhaled collectively, relief washing over them. Alina felt a surge of pride and confidence. They had faced real danger and survived, not by luck, but by careful observation, teamwork, and controlled action. Every lesson from the past days had been tested, and they had passed. The canyon gradually widened, leading them to a small plateau overlooking a vast expanse of desert. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows and golden light across the landscape. The hikers paused, taking in the view, their bodies exhausted but their spirits elevated. Alina felt a deep sense of gratitude toward the Apache woman, whose calm guidance had taught them to face danger with courage and intelligence. The woman motioned for them to rest. She guided them to a sheltered area where they could set up a small fire and prepare for the night. Alina helped gather rocks and branches, remembering how the woman had taught them efficiency and preparation. As they worked together, she felt a bond forming within the group, a shared respect for the lessons they had learned and the challenges they had faced. As night fell, the desert transformed. The stars emerged in a brilliant display, unpolluted by city lights. The hikers sat around the fire, reflecting on the day's events. Alina's thoughts drifted to the whispered words from the first night. "We are alone, let's do what is necessary." She understood now that the phrase was not just about survival. It was about courage, focus, teamwork, and the wisdom to act decisively when required. The Apache woman spoke briefly, her voice carrying softly over the desert night. "You have faced fear today. You have acted when necessary. That is the essence of survival, not panic, not hesitation, but awareness and action." Alina nodded, realizing that these words applied not only to the desert but to life itself. The lessons they had learned were universal, teaching them to face challenges with calm, careful, and deliberate effort. As the night deepened, the hikers prepared for sleep, setting up their small shelter and securing their supplies. Alina remained vigilant, her senses attuned to every sound, the distant howl of a coyote, the rustle of leaves in the wind, the shifting of rocks. The Apache woman remained nearby, a silent guardian and teacher, ensuring that they were safe and alert. Alina felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. Today had been the most challenging day yet, but it had also been the most enlightening. Lying on her mat, Alina thought about how much she had grown in just a few days. Fear had been transformed into confidence, uncertainty into action, and hesitation into focus. The desert had tested them in ways she could never have imagined, but the lessons were invaluable. The phrase from the first night now resonated deeply. Do what is necessary. She understood that survival required not only skill and knowledge, but also courage, awareness, and the ability to act decisively when the moment demanded. As she drifted into sleep, the fire crackling softly beside the shelter, Alina felt a sense of readiness. The desert was unpredictable and harsh, but she knew that she had learned to respect it, understand it, and navigate it with awareness and courage. The challenges of tomorrow loomed ahead, but for the first time she felt truly prepared. The morning light stretched across the desert, turning the sand into shades of gold and copper. Alina woke first, feeling a quiet sense of anticipation. The previous days had tested them in ways she could never have imagined. They had faced fear, navigated dangers, and learned lessons that went far beyond survival. Today, she knew, would be different. Today, they would move forward not just with caution, but with understanding. The hikers packed their supplies carefully, their movements deliberate and coordinated. The storm, the canyon, and the encounter with wild animals had transformed them from uncertain travelers into a team. Each person understood the importance of observation, patience, and careful action. Alina noticed how David, who had been so impatient at the start of the journey, now moved with awareness, checking each step and watching for hazards. Maria, once nervous and hesitant, now carried water and supplies with confidence, occasionally helping others who needed guidance. The Apache woman led the group to a wide plateau overlooking the desert below. From this vantage point, the vastness of the landscape became clear, stretching endlessly toward distant mountains. The wind carried the scent of dry sand and sagebrush, and the occasional bird soared gracefully above them. The group paused, absorbing the view, and Alina felt a deep sense of gratitude. The woman had guided them here not just physically but in spirit and mind as well. She spoke finally, her voice calm and firm. "You have learned to observe, to act, and to trust yourself. The desert tests all who enter it. You have faced it and you have learned. Remember this, courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the ability to act wisely despite fear." Alina listened carefully, feeling the weight of the words. They were simple, yet profound. She realized that the lessons of the desert applied not only to survival, but to every challenge in life. The group began their descent from the plateau, the terrain gradually becoming less steep, but no less demanding. Alina felt a new confidence in her steps. She noticed every detail, the texture of the sand, the placement of rocks, the movement of small desert animals, and used these observations to choose her path carefully. David and Maria followed, moving in sync, each step deliberate, each action considered. The Apache woman walked ahead, silently observing, but she did not need to guide them constantly. They were now capable of applying what they had learned. As they continued, they came across a small ravine. Water had collected here from the recent storms, forming a shallow pool. The hikers paused to drink and refresh themselves. Alina knelt at the edge of the water, watching the reflections ripple across the surface. She saw her own face, tired but determined, and felt a sense of accomplishment. This journey had changed her in ways she had not expected. She had learned to focus, to trust, and to act decisively. She had learned the meaning of do what is necessary. The Apache woman finally spoke again, her tone almost gentle. "You have faced challenges that would have defeated many. You have survived because you were prepared, aware, and willing to act. But remember, the desert is not always kind. Respect it, learn from it, and it will teach you more than any guidebook or lesson ever could." Alina nodded, feeling a sense of reverence for the land and for the woman who had guided them through it. As the day progressed, they navigated rocky paths and sandy stretches, encountering small obstacles along the way. A fallen branch blocked part of their path, and a loose rock threatened to cause a slip. But each time, Alina and the others acted carefully, remembering the lessons of the previous days. They worked together, using teamwork and communication to overcome every challenge. The fear that had once gripped them was replaced by focus, confidence, and mutual respect. By mid-afternoon, the group reached the edge of a canyon that opened onto a wide valley. The landscape below was dotted with sparse vegetation, and the distant mountains rose majestically against the horizon. The Apache woman paused, turning to face them. Her expression was serene yet commanding. "This is where our paths part," she said. "You have learned well. Now you must continue on your own, carrying the lessons with you. The desert will always be here to test you, but you are ready." Alina felt a pang of sadness. She had come to respect and admire the woman deeply. Her guidance had been patient, subtle, and powerful. She had taught them not just survival skills, but a philosophy of life: observation, patience, courage, and action when necessary. Alina realized that this encounter would stay with her forever. It had changed the way she thought, the way she acted, and the way she approached challenges. The group thanked the woman, each in their own way. David extended his hand, smiling sheepishly. "Thank you. I've learned a lot, more than I expected." Maria nodded, her eyes bright with gratitude. "Thank you for teaching us," she said softly. Alina stepped forward, her voice steady. "We will remember your lessons. Thank you for showing us how to act when it's necessary and how to see clearly when danger is near." The woman nodded, her eyes reflecting a quiet satisfaction. She turned and began walking back toward the plateau, her movements calm and purposeful. Alina watched her disappear into the rocks, feeling a mixture of awe and admiration. She knew that this was more than a farewell. It was a passing of wisdom, a gift that would stay with them far beyond the desert. As the hikers continued down into the valley, Alina reflected on everything they had experienced. The storm had tested their preparation, the canyon had tested their courage, and the wild animals had tested their awareness. Each challenge had been met with careful observation, thoughtful action, and teamwork. Alina realized that the desert had been a teacher, and the Apache woman had been the guide who showed them how to learn from it. They set up camp for the night in a small, sheltered area at the edge of the valley. The sun dipped below the mountains, casting long shadows and painting the sky in deep oranges and purples. Around the campfire, they shared their thoughts, reflecting on the journey. Alina spoke first. "I think the most important thing we've learned is not just how to survive, but how to think, how to act, and how to trust ourselves and each other." David nodded. "I never imagined I could stay calm in situations like that. But I did because we worked together and remembered what we learned." Maria added, "I feel stronger, more aware. I think I'll carry this with me forever." Alina smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. The lessons of the desert, the guidance of the Apache woman, and the challenges they had faced had left an indelible mark on her. She realized that courage, focus, and careful action were not only survival skills, they were life skills. She had learned to face fear without being controlled by it, to observe before acting, and to help others when needed. As night settled, Alina lay on her sleeping mat, looking up at the vast star-filled sky. The desert was silent but alive, filled with lessons and memories. She felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that they had faced the challenges together and had emerged stronger. The words from the first night echoed softly in her mind. "Do what is necessary." She understood them fully now, not as a warning but as guidance, a principle to live by in the desert and beyond. The next morning, the hikers prepared to continue their journey out of the valley. They moved with confidence, each step deliberate, each action guided by the lessons they had learned. The Apache woman was no longer with them, but her presence was felt in every careful movement, in every observation of the land, and in every choice they made. Alina felt a deep gratitude, knowing that this experience had transformed her and her companions. As they walked, the desert stretched endlessly before them, beautiful, harsh, and full of challenges. Alina felt ready to face it, not with fear but with awareness and courage. She knew that life would present many obstacles, but the lessons from the desert, the importance of observation, patience, teamwork, and decisive action, would guide her through anything. She carried the memory of the Apache woman with her, a reminder that true guidance often comes quietly, through actions and subtle teachings, rather than words alone. By the time the sun climbed high in the sky, the hikers reached the edge of the valley, where a more familiar path led them back toward civilization. Alina paused, looking back at the desert behind them. It seemed endless, full of secrets and challenges, yet it had given them knowledge, courage, and a sense of accomplishment. She knew that she would carry this experience for the rest of her life. And as they walked on, Alina whispered softly to herself, smiling, "Do what is necessary." She understood it fully now, not as a command from another, but as a guiding principle for life. She felt ready for anything, stronger, wiser, and more aware than she had ever been. The desert, with all its harsh beauty and lessons, had left its mark, and she would never forget it. The hikers continued together, their steps steady and purposeful, each carrying the lessons of the desert in their hearts. The Apache woman's guidance had prepared them not only for survival, but for life. And in that vast, silent landscape, Alina understood that courage, awareness, and thoughtful action were the true treasures of the journey.